Hey guys, tonight we step into a city so dense, so dark, and so smelly it practically invents the phrase sensory overload. The year is somewhere around 1850, the place is London, and you, poor thing, are about to try and survive it. The air? A warm, greasy stew of chimney soot, horse dung, and whatever's fermenting in the gutters. You blink through yellow fog thick enough to chew, trying not to slip on something squishy. And yes, that squishy thing might be alive. You've officially arrived in the beating, wheezing heart of Victorian England. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and the local time in the comments. I always love knowing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward, your boots squelching through layers of black mud, straw, and, is that cabbage? A passing cart sprays your skirts with a fine mist of mystery water. Welcome to London, home to more than 2 million souls and an estimated 100,000 horses, each leaving behind a generous daily gift. You're breathing in a mixture of hay, feces, coal smoke, and the general despair of tenement life. Historians still argue whether the infamous London fog was worse in summer or winter. Either way, it's always bad. The fog isn't romantic, it's more like being trapped inside a wet wool sock someone's been sweating into for a decade. In fact, it's not even proper fog, it's smog, the industrial byproduct of 1,000 factories, kitchen fires, and open sewers. Some people wear handkerchiefs over their mouths. You, trying to be fashionable, opt for a lavender-scented kerchief, though the lavender barely masks the air's bouquet of burnt toast, sewage, and decaying things no one wants to investigate. Street sweepers, called scavengers, are out at dawn, scraping the day's droppings into carts. It's a losing battle. One French tourist in the 1850s described London as a city of perpetual mud. It's not even mud, though. It's what happens when filth and moisture fall in love. You pass chimney sweeps, all soot and sorrow. The younger boys, blackened from head to toe, are barely 10. They grin at you through coal-darkened teeth. You nod politely, pretending not to notice the permanent coughs rattling in their chests. There's an odd rhythm to the street sounds, clopping hooves, hawkers shouting in thick accents, the distant ring of a church bell. And always underneath it all, the faint gurgle of drains failing to do their one job. London's sewer system won't really get sorted out until after the Great Stink of 1858, which, you guessed it, was exactly as it sounds. You step over a dead cat. No one reacts. Around you, buildings lean inward, squished together like nervous passengers on a rainy omnibus. Soot clings to every surface. Even daylight seems filtered through a grimy film. Some windows are bricked over, not from renovations, but because of the infamous window tax. That's right. The government once taxed homeowners per window, so many simply walled them up. Because why pay for light and air when you can live like a mole? And the smells. Oh, the smells. You pass a tallow maker's shop. The stink of boiled animal fat hits like a punch to the sinuses. Next, a fishmonger with yesterday's unsold goods still on display. Then, worst of all, a night soil man wheeling away the contents of someone's chamber pot. You learn quickly not to breathe too deeply near corners or alleyways. Even the rivers betray you. The Thames looks like a watery grave for old shoes and failed dreams. It bubbles ominously. Rats, bold and fat, skitter along the edge. One pauses to nibble something pink. You decide not to look too closely. It's not all horror, of course. There's a charm in the chaos. Children play in the streets with hoops and sticks, their laughter oddly cheerful. A flower seller offers you a wilting posy with a grin full of gaps. And somewhere in the fog, a violinist plays a haunting tune that makes you stop, if only for a moment. There's life here, even if it's clinging on by cracked fingernails. You stumble upon a street preacher warning of damnation, waving a worn Bible and pointing to the sky, or maybe just the upper story of a brothel. A few steps later, a man in a velvet waistcoat tries to sell you a watch he very clearly didn't pay for. Both speak with the same urgency. One fun tidbit. To combat the ever-present grime, some Victorians developed elaborate self-cleaning boots. These contraptions, complete with tiny brushes and compartments for polish, were ingenious and utterly useless. Nothing truly stayed clean for more than 10 minutes. A hansom cab clatters by, nearly clipping your hip. The driver shouts something vaguely profane in Cockney rhyming slang. You can't understand him, but you're pretty sure it wasn't "have a lovely day." Behind him, a man with a cart full of leeches calls out his wares. For a moment, you wonder if being bled for health wouldn't be the worst part of your day. You finally reach a narrow passage called a close where the buildings lean in so tightly they almost kiss. You're not sure if the dripping from above is rainwater, laundry, or something else entirely. Spoiler, probably not laundry. Despite it all, there's a rhythm to Victorian London that's almost hypnotic. The city pulses with a strange energy, part fear, part ambition, part coldest heartbeat. You'll learn to walk faster, duck lower, and never, ever touch a handrail. Because in this place, even standing still can feel like a gamble. Especially if you're standing too close to a cart, a curb, or a suspicious puddle that seems to whisper, "Step in me, I dare you." You wake the next morning to a soft rattling at your single-pane window. Not birdsong, oh no, Victorian London doesn't deal in poetic awakenings. It's the sound of coal carts trundling down cobbled lanes and the distant holler of a ragambone man. You sit up slowly, the damp wool blanket sticking faintly to your arms. Outside, the fog hasn't lifted. It rarely does. The entire world looks like it's been dusted in ash and regret. Time to get dressed. And if you thought surviving the street was tough, just wait till your own clothing tries to kill you. You shuffle toward the cracked wardrobe where a neat row of deadly fashion awaits. First, the underlayers. Women, you'll be starting with a linen chemise, then stepping into your corset. Boned with actual whale baleen and laced until you can almost feel your pancreas tapping out a little SOS. Breathing is optional. A fainting couch is advisable. Men, you don't get off easy either. High-starch collars can and do cut off circulation if you're unlucky. And if you're particularly stylish, you're wearing a cravat stiffened with glue. Because nothing says gentleman like choking hazard chic. Next come the layers. Crinolines, bustles, petticoats, trousers, waistcoats, jackets, more jackets. Victorian fashion doesn't believe in moderation. The average upper-class woman might wear up to 37 pounds of clothing. That's the weight of a small child. On you, at all times, just for walking to the bakery. You reach for your gloves. Elegantly dyed in that vivid green you adore. That's arsenic, by the way. Yes, arsenic, the one you usually associate with a murder mystery or a particularly determined ex. It's what gives your gloves that lovely vibrant sheen and what's slowly absorbing into your skin with each dainty wave. Historians still argue whether arsenic-laced fashion killed people outright or merely added a charming dash of chronic illness to one's daily routine. Your boots are tight, not because they're too small, but because Victorian cobblers believed shoes should mold to your foot over time. Blisters aren't a flaw, they're a phase. As you lace up, you're reminded of an actual fact. Queen Victoria herself reportedly had bunions. Fashion didn't spare the monarch either. A final look in the mirror and you admire your ensemble, elegant, proper, possibly toxic. Just as society expects. Outside, your neighbors are dressing too. You can spot social class by cut and cleanliness. Silk and velvet mean wealth. Coarse wool and cotton patched with flour sacks mean otherwise. But everyone, rich or poor, has one thing in common. No one is washing these clothes often. Laundry is a once-a-week affair for the lucky. For most, it's bi-weekly. Detergents are a mix of lye, ash, and elbow grease. You, being practical, opt to brush the worst of the soot off your collar with a clothes brush and mutter a little prayer that no one notices the mustard stain from 2 days ago. A fun side note, the color black, so ubiquitous in Victorian fashion, isn't just stylish, it's practical. It hides coal smudges, city grime, and the occasional surprise pigeon droppings. It's the color of survival. Also of mourning, which works out well, since Victorians are nearly always mourning something. Even children aren't spared the weight and weirdness of the era's wardrobe. Toddlers wobble down the street in scaled-down versions of adult outfits, including tiny corsets and button boots that take 20 minutes to wrangle. There's a reason childhood photos show such grim expressions. Those kids are sweating through 6 layers of wool and pretending not to notice the fleas. Speaking of which, your scalp itches. You reach up tentatively. Lice? Possibly. The cleanest-looking people still harbor whole ecosystems under their hats and wigs. You consider combing your hair, but your brush made with real boar bristles isn't exactly hygienic. It's seen better decades. Men apply pomade thick with bear grease or pig fat, which explains the permanent shine and the curious way hats tend to stick when removed. And women? You've been collecting hair from your brush to form a rat, a little bundle you stuff under your updo to make it look fuller. Because nothing says romance like a hairdo padded with your own shed follicles. Now let's talk about undergarments. You're wearing drawers open at the crotch because no one has time to wrestle with a dozen buttons when nature calls. That's right, Victorian modesty meets surprising efficiency. You'll need that design when you eventually encounter public toilets, but we'll save that joy for later. Your neighbor steps outside, her dress swishing with each careful step. You notice a faint shimmer on her cheeks. Rouge, of course, made with lead. Her complexion might glow now, but by next year she could be glowing for very different reasons. She smiles at you, and a tooth drops out. No one mentions it. Even accessories aren't safe. Bracelets are tight enough to restrict blood flow. Brooches are pinned with sharp, easily lost needles, and belts, often cinched until the wearer turns a pleasant shade of lavender. In high society, women have been known to faint in the middle of dinner, both from tight corsetry and a mild case of oxygen deprivation. You know how modern pockets are a joke? In the Victorian era, they weren't even attached to your clothing. Women's pockets were tied on under dresses, like secret pouches, which would be charming if it weren't for the fact that men got actual, functional pockets sewn into their trousers. Sexism, thy name is haberdashery. One quirky tidbit, men sometimes carried posy holders, little metal vases with fresh flowers. Not for romance, but to sniff discreetly when walking past less than fragrant areas. It's the original scented mask. You kind of want one. You check your watch, well, you wish you had one. Pocket watches are expensive and your schedule is more go until something hurts than meet me at noon. Still, you know it's time to move. The fog's thinning slightly and the city waits. So, boots laced, corset cinched, gloves mildly poisonous on, you're officially ready for another day in Victorian London. Dressed to impress. Or expire. One last glance in the mirror and you sigh. You look the part. Whether you survive it, that's still up for debate. You step outside with your stomach already rumbling. It's breakfast time, or at least, time to figure out what counts as food around here. Victorian London doesn't exactly do brunch. There's no avocado toast or frothy cappuccino waiting around the corner. There is, however, something warmish, vaguely solid, and hopefully not moving. You can work with that. Your first stop is the baker's stall. The bread looks decent from a distance, golden brown and reassuringly solid. But up close, you notice the chalk. Yep, chalk. Bakers, especially those in poorer areas, often mix chalk or alum into flour to stretch their supply and brighten the loaf. It wasn't technically lethal unless you ate it regularly. Which, of course, everyone did. Historians still argue whether adulterated bread or contaminated milk killed more Londoners in the 1800s. Either way, you'll probably get a little of both before the day's done. You buy a small, hard roll with a coin that feels suspiciously sticky. Money, like everything else in the city, comes with its own crust of dirt. You bite into the bread and feel your molars scream. It tastes mostly like sadness and the faint suggestion of calcium. Still, it's better than nothing. You wander toward a street vendor boiling something in a blackened kettle. The scent is complex. A mix of old cabbage, watery beef, and possibly last night's rat stew. You ask what's cooking. He mutters tea and ladles you a cup of thin, brown liquid that tastes like burnt leaves and rainwater. Welcome to the working-class breakfast beverage of choice. You sip carefully. It's hot, at least. Victorians weren't big on cold drinks unless they were ill or pretending to be. Tea is one of the few beverages safe to drink thanks to the boiling process. Water itself? Don't even think about it. The city's water supply is drawn straight from the Thames in places, and it's brimming with bacteria, waste, and the occasional floating surprise. If you're feeling fancy, you might add milk to your tea. But be warned, milk in Victorian London is frequently diluted with river water or whitened with plaster of Paris. Yes, actual plaster. On the plus side, it gives your bones a head start on their own tombstone. You find a crate to sit on and nibble your chalkbread while watching a nearby child chase pigeons for fun or possibly food. He's barefoot. His face is covered in soot. And he's laughing. Somehow, this feels like a perfectly normal morning. A well-dressed woman passes by, lifting her skirts to avoid a puddle that may or may not be alive. She clutches a silver flask, laudanum probably. Many upper-class Victorians start their day with a sip of opium-laced tincture. It calms the nerves, improves digestion, and makes the smell of London slightly more bearable. You, however, aren't rich enough to blur the world so luxuriously. Instead, you consider an egg. Not a fresh one, of course. Most eggs sold on the street are past their prime and stored in open baskets, attracting flies with magnetic precision. But they're protein. You crack one open into a frying pan someone's set up on a brazier in the alley. It sizzles in what may be lard or motor oil. No one's quite sure. You share a bite with a stray cat who looks both grateful and disappointed. Fair enough. A newspaper boy shouts nearby, cholera death toll rises. Rats in the walls. Read all about it. You try not to lose your appetite. Cholera outbreaks are common, with the worst epidemic hitting in 1854. One contaminated water pump can take out an entire neighborhood. You make a mental note to avoid Broad Street, where Dr. Jon Snow, not the one from Game of Thrones, will eventually make epidemiology history by identifying the pump as the source. A quirky detail about breakfast culture: the middle classes often insist on moderation, eating frugal meals to appear virtuous, while the poor eat what they can find and the rich sneak into private clubs for lavish affairs involving cold meats, jam, and gossip. Breakfast is more than sustenance, it's a class performance. You toss the rest of your bread to a passing dog and stand up. A man selling eels approaches. He holds up a jar of them, alive and wiggling. Jellied or writhing? He asks. You politely decline. Eels are cheap, common, and revolting to anyone who's never grown up with them. Still, they're a staple for thousands. For dessert, you're tempted by a toffee apple. But sugar, while increasingly popular thanks to colonial imports, is expensive and often bulked up with sand or ground-up bones. You pass. Your dentist, if you had one, would thank you. Instead, you settle for a treacle stick, which is mostly syrup-coated wood. A passing chimney sweep offers to trade you a bite of his cold potato for half your tea. You agree. The potato is soft, mealy, and speckled with ash. You've definitely eaten worse today. Victorian food safety is, in a word, theoretical. Everything from candies to pickles may be laced with copper, lead, or arsenic-based dyes. Green sweets are especially risky. One popular green jelly was so poisonous it reportedly glowed faintly in the dark. And yet, it sold out regularly. You brush crumbs from your lap and sigh. It's not much of a meal, but you're full enough to keep going. Full enough, perhaps, to walk toward whatever labor or chaos awaits you this afternoon. Your stomach grumbles, not from hunger, but from mild concern. You'll be spending a good deal of the day hoping that whatever's brewing inside you doesn't demand urgent attention. You pause as a young girl walks past, clutching a roll and humming a lullaby. Her cheeks are smudged with dirt, but her eyes are bright. And somehow she's managed to acquire jam. Real jam. Possibly strawberry. You lock eyes for a second. She breaks the roll and offers you half. You take it. The sweet. Miraculously, it tastes like real fruit. For a moment, breakfast in Victorian London isn't so bad after all. You finish the last sticky bite of jam-covered bread just as the church bell tolls somewhere in the distance. One slow, echoing chime for each unforgiving hour. It's time to get to work. Or, if you're unemployed, time to pretend you're looking for work while quietly hoping someone drops a coin in your general direction. Employment in Victorian London is, well, let's say flexible. If you're lucky, you have a job. If you're really lucky, that job doesn't involve losing a limb. But for most, survival means toil, grit, and a daily flirtation with injury, disease, or your employer's bad mood. You head toward the factory district, where chimneys spike the sky like industrial thorns. The air thickens with soot as you walk, your lungs protesting with every breath. You cough into your handkerchief and, yep, there's black residue. Victorian lungs double as filtration devices. If you're a man, maybe you work in a foundry or a textile mill. The shifts are long, the pay is low, and the temperature inside could poach an egg. Sparks fly, gears whir, and any distraction might mean your hand becomes part of the machinery. And here's a real fact. Workers often lose fingers in spinning frames, especially young boys tasked with cleaning beneath them while they're still running. Yes, while they're still running. If you're a woman, perhaps you're in a match factory. Your fingers are stained yellow from handling white phosphorus. You've heard of phossy jaw, the terrible condition where jawbones rot from within, caused by phosphorus exposure. But you tell yourself it won't happen to you. You're careful. You wear gloves sometimes. You only cough when no one's looking. Children, too, aren't spared. A boy no older than 9 tugs at your sleeve, asking if you've seen his sister. She's sweeping chimneys now, he mumbles, eyes down. You nod, though you haven't. You can't imagine squeezing into a soot-choked flue for a halfpenny a day, but she can. She has to. Historians still argue whether Victorian child labor laws were revolutionary or merely decorative. By mid-century, reforms technically banned work for the very young, but enforcement was spotty and bribes were common. A clever employer could claim a 10-year-old was 12. A desperate parent might insist the same. You pass a tannery, the stench almost enough to make your eyes water. Skins hang like grim laundry, flies circling with military precision. The workers here handle lime and urine to soften hides, and they'll carry that sour, acrid smell with them long after the shift ends. You keep walking. Not all jobs are formal, of course. Some are improvised, pieced together like patchwork. You spot mudlarks down by the river, kids and old women wading through filth, hunting coins, bones, or anything vaguely resellable. The Thames is both monster and muse, hiding secrets beneath its oily surface. Once, a mudlark found a severed finger with a ring still attached. Paid for 2 dinners and a new coat. A quirky job? The pure finder. Sounds pleasant, right? It's not. These brave souls collect dog feces, pure, used in tanning leather. They carry it in buckets, and yes, it pays. Barely. But it's work, and in London, that's something. You, today, are shadowing a costermonger. He's a gruff man with a heart somewhere beneath his grime-streaked waistcoat. His barrow is stacked with apples and turnips and something that might be a beetroot or possibly a rock. You follow him through the lanes, shouting prices in unison, dodging constables who mutter about licenses. Market traders like your companion often walk a legal tightrope. Without the proper peddling permit, you can be fined or arrested. Still, there's a rhythm to it, banter, haggling, the occasional free bruised apple for a hungry child. You call out fresh turnips. Straight from the paws. You have no idea where they're from. Probably not a farm. Possibly a cellar. Doesn't matter. They look edible enough. By midday, the grime on your face feels permanent. You smell of coal smoke, apple skin, and just a hint of fear. The factory whistles scream, releasing workers for their meager lunch breaks. A woman with bandaged hands nods at you. She offers a piece of cold pie. It's mostly potato. You take it and say thank you. Some workers eat standing. Others collapse onto curbs. A few drink gin, mostly. It's cheap, potent, and temporarily erases the ache behind your eyes. You sip water instead, boiling hot from a tin flask because even street-level hydration is a gamble. You hear shouting nearby. A coal cart has overturned, spilling black lumps across the street. Children rush forward to gather what they can before the driver returns. You help a boy carry a sack, his fingers raw from the cold. "Mum'll be happy," he says with a toothless grin. You smile back. As the afternoon heat rises, not warmth exactly, but the trapped, radiating kind that bounces off brick and sweat. You notice the contrasts. Wealthy gentlemen in top hats hurry past in carriages. Their boots shine. Their faces are clean. They don't make eye contact. To them, you're part of the city's noise. Still, some jobs are better than others. A lamplighter walks by with a long pole. His pace is slow, deliberate. Lighting the city's gas lamps is an oddly peaceful duty, even if the pay is low and the ladder's wobbly. One fringe occupation you hadn't considered? The knocker-up. Their job? Wake people up in the morning by tapping on windows with a long stick. Alarm clocks weren't common yet, and punctuality was everything. Some used pea shooters. Others memorized routes by heart. It's oddly charming and probably very annoying if you're trying to sleep in. You think briefly about applying. But then you remember how many windows are on the 3rd floor. Your stick would need a sequel. As the sun begins its slow retreat, your costermonger friend counts the coins. Not bad for a day's trade. He hands you a copper or 2. Enough for a roll, maybe even a splash of gin. Your feet ache. Your back protests. But for now, you've earned something. A day survived. You part ways at the corner, your shadow stretching behind you like a flag of endurance. The streets are beginning to change, lamps glowing, footsteps quicker, dangers slinking into the edges. You've survived another day of Victorian work life. Bruised, maybe. Tired, definitely. But still upright. And in the city? That counts as winning. As twilight bleeds into the alleys and rooftops, you feel the air shift. Victorian London takes on a second life after dark, darker, colder, and just a little more feral. The factories fall silent, the markets shudder, and the city exhales the soot and stress of its long working day. But for you, night doesn't mean rest, it means navigating the brutal, absurd game of where you're going to sleep. You don't have a proper address. You don't even have a key. But that puts you in good company. Over 100,000 people in London's teeming sprawl live in lodging houses or sleep wherever they can find a dry corner. You've got a few options, none of them ideal, and all of them likely to leave you poorer, colder, or itchier than before. Your first thought is a common lodging house. These are the Victorian equivalent of budget motels crossed with sardine cans. You find one near Whitechapel where a crowd gathers outside beneath a flickering gas lamp. A woman in a bonnet whispers, "Full up." The air smells like boiled cabbage, tobacco, and unwashed feet. Still, you push your way in. Inside, you're greeted by a noise best described as damp chaos. Snores, coughs, murmured arguments. The matron at the desk eyes you like she's pricing meat. "4p if you want a rope," she says. Ah, yes, the infamous penny rope beds. 1 penny gets you a section of floor. 2p buys you a rope strung wall to wall where you can lean forward and sleep hanging from your armpits like a forgotten marionette. If you're lucky, no one vomits on your boots. If you're very lucky, you wake up at all. Historians still argue whether these rope sleeping setups were born of genuine practicality or were just a twisted landlord joke taken too far. Either way, they were real and occasionally reused without cleaning. You decline politely. You move to a cheaper establishment down the road. It's open air. Just a sheltered archway where a group of night lodgers huddle for warmth. You recognize the system, coffin beds. These are literal wooden boxes lined up in rows, stacked like bunk coffins where people sleep in narrow rows for a penny or two. They're called coffin beds not because they kill you, though some do, but because they look exactly like where you'll end up eventually. You run a finger along the wood grain. It's splintery stained. Someone's name is carved on the side, Tilly 1871. A tiny flower sketch. A trace of someone else trying to stay human. For a brief, desperate moment, you consider the workhouse. Not to stay, just to peek. These are government-run institutions meant to help the destitute by offering shelter and food in exchange for your freedom, your dignity, and your ability to breathe without filling out a form. Couples are separated. Families divided. Meals are gruel and conversation is frowned upon. It's basically prison with worse PR. The gatekeeper eyes you like a suspicious crow. "You in need?" he asks. "No more than usual," you say, and walk away. Instead, you head toward the Thames. The riverbank offers one final backup plan. Sleeping rough. Beneath the bridge, you spot others already settling in. They wrap themselves in newspaper, the poor man's blanket, and lean against crumbling stone walls. You pick a spot that doesn't smell too strongly of fish or decay and lay your head down on your folded coat. A man next to you mutters in his sleep. A woman hums a lullaby. Somewhere across the water, a dog barks and a bell tolls. Before you can doze off, something scuttles past your foot. You jerk awake. Rats, of course. London's unofficial mascot. You sigh and scoot a little closer to the woman humming. She notices and offers you a strip of blanket. You're in this together, after all. Not everyone sleeps like this, of course. The rich are tucked away behind thick drapes and feather mattresses, dreaming opium-tinged dreams. The rising middle class, clerks, teachers, shopkeepers might rent a tidy room with a shared chamber pot and a flickering gas lamp. But for you and for thousands of others, every night is a roll of the dice. Here's a quirky little sleep ritual some Londoners, especially those in the colder corners, use to wear nightcaps dipped in vinegar to cool the brain and ward off nightmares. You can't say if it works, but it sounds like it would make you smell like a salad. You try to sleep. You really do. But the noise is constant, hoofbeats, distant arguing, a coughing fit 2 doorways down. The gas lamps cast out shadows, flickering like restless ghosts. Your limbs ache from the day's labor and your stomach protests the chalk-bread breakfast. And yet, there's a moment. A brief pause. The city exhales again. You feel it. This enormous, aching organism of a city settling into sleep in its own strange way. Somewhere, a streetwalker laughs softly. A night watchman taps his staff. The fog creeps back in, rolling low over the cobblestones like a tired old dog looking for its own place to lie down. You pull the strip of blanket tighter and close your eyes. You don't sleep well. No one does here. But eventually your thoughts drift. Past the chimney stacks, past the sour smells, into something softer. A memory, maybe, or just the exhaustion that's kinder than comfort. Tomorrow you'll do it all again. But for now, Beneath this indifferent sky and these crumbling stone arches, you're horizontal. You're breathing. You've made it through another day. And in Victorian London, that counts for something. You wake up stiff. Not just sore, splintered. It feels like someone replaced your spine with a rusty street lamp. Your shoulder is cramping, your mouth tastes like coal and disappointment, and you're not entirely sure your toes are still attached. The sky above is a soft, bruised gray, and the city begins to rattle awake just as unwillingly as you. The woman who shared her blanket with you is already gone. So is the man who muttered in his sleep. You're alone now, save for the fog. It rolls in slow and low, dragging across the cobblestones like a drunk old cat. It blurs the streets, softens the edges of buildings, and turns every lamplight into a sleepy smudge. Victorian fog isn't just water vapor, it's a thick stew of coal smoke, chimney soot, and all the city's dirty little secrets. Londoners called it pea soup, and not affectionately. Sometimes it's so thick you can't see your own feet. People have been known to walk straight into the river or a passing carriage and not realize it until it's far too late. As you shuffle through the mist, every sound is dampened and distant. The clang of a bell, the soft plop of horse manure, a vendor shouting something indecipherable. You bump into a man rounding the corner, he apologizes, or maybe curses, you're not sure. He vanishes again into the swirling gray. There's a phrase you remember hearing, the London particular. That's what Charles Dickens called it. Poetic, sure. But it also sounds like something that might choke you if you inhale too hard. And make no mistake, this fog can kill. The Great Smog of 1952, decades from now, will take over 10,000 lives. But even here in the 1870s, it's already a menace. You pull your collar up and squint ahead. Visibility's about the length of your arm. The city feels like it's holding its breath. Historians still argue whether the Victorians truly understood just how toxic their air had become. Some claimed it was bracing. Invigorating, even. Those people also claimed radium was good for your complexion, so grain of soot with that opinion. You pass a lamplighter barely visible through the haze. He taps the glass with his pole, coaxing each flame to life. Without these gas lights, you'd walk right into a wall or off a pier. And sometimes you do anyway. Gaslight itself is temperamental, weak, flickering, and prone to sudden blackouts. But at least it gives the illusion of safety. Modern-day fog might cancel a flight. Victorian fog cancels entire lives. You reach a market stall that's already setting up, the vendor grumbling as he arranges rotting onions beside slightly less rotting cabbages. He wears goggles. Not for fashion, just to keep the soot out of his eyes. He sees you, mutters something about bad soup today, and offers you a bruised apple for a ha'penny. You can't tell if it's red, brown, or just covered in fog. Still, you chew. Your boots squelch in something unidentifiable. Probably mud. Possibly worse. The Thames, invisible through the mist, still makes itself known by smell alone, briny, fishy, and a bit like a damp bookshelf. Then, out of the fog, a horse rears up. You jump back. A cabman yells at you for standing where he definitely couldn't see you. You apologize, even though you're fairly certain he was driving blind. Carriages roll slow through this kind of weather, but still crush bones just as efficiently. Some Londoners carry lanterns or tie ropes to companions when walking in fog. One quirky practice you've seen, walking with a white cloth stretched ahead like a personal fog banner. It makes you look like a confused ghost, but at least you're a visible ghost. You duck into a coffee stall, a rough wooden shack where a woman boils something vaguely brown. It smells faintly of burnt beans and strongly of socks. She hands you a mug with a wink. You don't ask what's in it. You sip and it warms your chest. Possibly also your teeth. You lean against the stall for a moment. The fog swirls around your legs like it's deciding whether to trip you or just hug you extra damply. In this smothered atmosphere, time becomes strange. Minutes stretch like rubber. The whole city feels paused as if it's waiting for the weather to make the next move. Back on the streets, you follow gaslight after gaslight, treating each one like a breadcrumb. You hear voices but can't see faces. London becomes a maze of whispering shapes and sudden footsteps. You walk past what you think is a police officer, though it might also have been a lamppost in a coat. Victorians took a strange pride in enduring fog. Writers romanticized it, artists painted it, and detectives solved murders inside it. You know better. There's nothing poetic about phlegm and the sound of a neighbor falling into a coal chute. And yet, there is something eerie and beautiful about it, too. The way buildings appear and vanish. The way your own footsteps echo like someone else's. The city becomes a dreamscape, a place that doesn't quite exist the same way it did yesterday. It's half nightmare, half lullaby. You pause beside a newspaper boy. He shouts headlines into the mist, his voice cracking. Fog claims 4. Woman found in tree. You blink. He shrugs. Could be true. Finally, as midday creeps in, the fog begins to lift. Just slightly. The streetlights look less like fireflies and more like actual sources of illumination. You can see shapes again, horses, carts, faces. The city reassembles itself like a puzzle you weren't sure had all its pieces. The air is still thick, still gray, but now it's breathable. The worst is over. For now. You look down at your coat. It's damp, gritty, and smells faintly of dead fireplace. But you're still upright. Still moving. Another morning endured. And in Victorian London? That's a miracle with fog on top. The fog may have lifted, but the streets of Victorian London don't exactly sparkle in the sunlight. They squelch. They squirm. And sometimes they even explode. You step gingerly over a puddle that might be water but is probably horse urine, and you begin your daily ballet. Dodging dung heaps, ducking under laundry lines, and weaving around a very determined goose. It's easy to forget, in the sweeping paintings and costume dramas, just how filthy this city really is. Not just a little untidy, monumentally gross. We're talking open sewers, dead rats in the gutters, and mud that's only 20% natural. The Victorians had a complicated relationship with filth. They feared it, they lived in it, and sometimes they even bottled it up and called it medicine. Looking at you, pure spring tonics made with Thames water. You sidestep a particularly ambitious pile of manure. Esteems. A man with a bucket scoops it up and tosses it onto a cart. That's a pure finder. A job that involves collecting dog droppings, or pure, for tanneries to use in leather processing. Yes, someone is literally paid to gather feces for a living. You make eye contact. He grins. His teeth are optional. Down a narrow alley, you catch a whiff of something truly appalling. You peek in. A bone boiler is at work, melting down animal remains to make glue. The smell hits like a punch of old soup and melted boots. You recoil. Still, the Victorians were nothing if not resourceful. Nearly everything had a second life. Rags became paper, fat became soap, and broken glass became ballast for ships or maybe someone's window pane. Entire microeconomies thrived in the muck. You pass a mudlark, usually a child, who's up to their elbows in river sludge, fishing out nails, buttons, and bits of rope to sell. You think about joining in, then remember the stories of hands sliced open on rusted tins and feet dissolving in industrial runoff. Maybe not today. Historians still argue whether this underclass economy was a product of ingenuity or just desperation baked into a system designed to ignore poverty. Either way, it kept people alive barely. The streets themselves are unpredictable. One moment you're on firm cobblestone. The next, your boot disappears into a sinkhole of mystery mush. Street sweepers try to keep up, pushing waste into piles. But the volume of debris, both natural and man-made, is overwhelming. In fact, you're standing in the very heart of what was once dubbed the Great Stink. That's not just poetic hyperbole. It was a literal historical event in 1858, when the Thames became so polluted that Parliament had to hang soaked curtains in the windows to block the smell. Even Queen Victoria gagged. You understand her reaction deeply, as you wade past a particularly ambitious pool of slime. And then there's the noise. Victorian London never really shuts up. Carriage wheels clatter over stone, vendors bark, dogs bark back, and somewhere nearby a man is shouting about eels. Not selling them, just shouting about them. A street performer flips his hat and sings a bawdy tune about chimney sweeps. A child claps along while his companion tries to pick your pocket. You bat him away gently. He's not even trying that hard. Probably a trainee. You pass a woman selling bootlace soup, essentially hot water with a ribbon of onion and a whole lot of imagination. She smiles sadly. Fills the belly, she says. You believe her. Mostly. There's a clever, if slightly horrifying, little fact you remember. Victorian streets were sometimes sprinkled with carbolic acid to fight disease and stench. It kind of worked. Until it burned your shoes and sometimes your feet. A whiff of it catches your nose, now sharp, sterile, unnatural. Like a haunted hospital. Public sanitation is improving, technically. The construction of the massive underground sewer system led by Sir Joseph Bazalgette is well underway. A marvel of engineering. A triumph of modernity. But you're not standing on the sewer, you're still ankle deep in the bits it hasn't quite managed to collect. You duck into a narrow passage known as a court, a dead-end alley where the poorest of the poor live in crumbling tenements stacked like crooked teeth. Laundry drips overhead. You hear coughing. You always hear coughing. You pass a water pump. A woman fills her bucket, eyeing the murky liquid with suspicion. Tastes better than gin, she says. You're not sure if that's a compliment or a cry for help. Even the animals seem affected. The city's stray dogs walk with a kind of grim resolve. Cats prowl the rooftops like judgmental spirits. Pigeons sit on ledges and coo in the exact tone of someone about to faint from fumes. And then, of course, the night soilmen. These unsung heroes of horror arrive in the wee hours to empty privies and cesspools, hauling away human waste in heavy carts. It's an actual profession. One of them waves to you cheerfully. You wave back, respectfully keeping your distance. His boots have seen things. Despite all this, despite the smells, the slop, the slippery things that may once have had names, life carries on. A child skips through a puddle like it's not a toxic swamp. A baker hauls warm loaves onto a wooden cart, and the scent, flour, yeast, safety, cuts through the filth like a gift. You follow it. You can't afford a loaf, but you can inhale with purpose. For a moment, it's almost enough. This city may be a rotting mess of soot and secrets, but it's your rotting mess, and somehow that makes it bearable. You step over a suspicious puddle and into another day. You've survived the muck. You've braved the fog. Now, as your stomach mutters something between a protest and a threat, you realize it's time to confront one of the day's most pressing dilemmas: food. You might assume, in a sprawling city like Victorian London, that eating wouldn't be a problem. Surely there's a pie stall on every corner, a butcher flinging sausages with flourish, and a friendly matron ladling stew from a cauldron of mystery meat. Well, yes. And no. You start your search near a busy market square, drawn by the scent of something vaguely edible wafting through the air. But as you get closer, the specifics get blurrier. Is that beef? Rat? Beef flavored with rat? You sidle up to the vendor. Stew, he says proudly, slapping the ladle into the pot. You look in. It's brown. Definitely brown. You spot what might be a carrot and what definitely isn't. You decide not to ask. Hunger, after all, demands sacrifice. You sit on a crate with your steaming bowl of almost food, trying to remember if your last tetanus shot was within the century. The texture is inconsistent, but warm. And that's worth a lot in a city where cold can slip through your clothes and straight into your bones. Victorian food, especially for the poor, is more about survival than satisfaction. The rich have elaborate meals served under chandeliers by servants who polish the silver twice. The working class? You're lucky if your bread isn't mostly sawdust. And yes, that's not an exaggeration, bread adulteration was rampant. Bakers bulked out their flour with chalk, alum, and even ground-up bones. It wasn't illegal until the second half of the 19th century, and even then, enforcement was iffy. You once bit into a loaf that crunched. It wasn't toasted. Historians still argue whether these practices were truly necessary due to cost or simply a case of profit-driven callousness. Either way, your molars are paying the price. You wander to a nearby stall selling eels. Not in fancy tranches or jellied delicacies, just whole eels. Writhing, some of them. The vendor grabs one, chops it cleanly, and drops it into a bubbling cauldron without breaking eye contact. 2 pence for a bowl, he says. You decline politely. Your last encounter with eels ended with regret and a lingering aftertaste of swamp. Instead, you follow the scent of something sweet. A woman is frying what looks like dough in a shallow pan of lard. She calls them fritters. They smell like hope. You buy one. It's hot and vaguely cinnamony. It sticks to your fingers. It might be your best meal this week. The wealthy, of course, dine very differently. You once glimpsed a dinner party through the back window of a townhouse, course after course, oysters, roast duck, sponge cakes taller than your hat. The guests laughed politely, dabbing their mouths with lace. You, meanwhile, licked sugar off your palm like a raccoon with a sweet tooth. A fun, and by fun we mean awful, fact: food safety is still in its awkward teenage phase. Milk often arrives watered down, sometimes with a hint of chalk for whitening. Tea might be mixed with hedge clippings. And meat, well, let's just say that if it smells fresh, it's probably soap. You duck into a coffee stall, not the charming kind with baristas and foam hearts, but a wooden shack with a tin kettle and a man who may or may not have washed his hands in 1871. Still, for a penny, he pours you a cup of something hot and vaguely coffee-shaped. You sip. It's bitter, gritty, and glorious. Inside the stall, you overhear a man talking about a newfangled invention: tinned food. Meat in a metal can, he says, eyes wide. Lasts for years. You nod thoughtfully. Then remember a newspaper story about a man who ate a can of mutton and turned blue. Maybe not today. You return to the streets. A group of children huddle around a fishmonger's cart hoping for scraps. The man tosses them a few heads and some tail bits. They cheer like it's Christmas. You blink. And then realize it kind of is. Further down, you pass a stall selling tripe, the stomach lining of cows, boiled and served like an unwilling jellyfish. A woman stirs it with a long wooden spoon. Good for the constitution, she says. You try not to breathe through your nose. In taverns and alehouses, the fare improves slightly. Stews, pies, maybe even a slice of ham if you're lucky and the landlord likes your face. But you've also seen someone pull a thumbtack out of a sausage, so you weigh your options carefully. You end up in a public soup kitchen, one of the charitable ones set up by religious groups. The soup is thin but warm, ladled into bowls by volunteers with stern faces and soft hearts. You thank them. It's not just food. It's kindness, and that can be rare here. Modern kitchens obsess over presentation and flavor. Victorian kitchens, at least the kind you can access, prioritize edibility. And not always successfully. Yet somehow you manage to stay fed. You even find a woman selling apple peels dusted in sugar. A kind of street dessert made from scraps. You crunch on one as you walk. As the sun climbs, the smells of the city change. Coal smoke, horse sweat, frying grease, and the ever-present perfume of the Thames blend into a haze that clings to your clothes and fills your lungs. You burp and it tastes like eel ghosts. Food in Victorian London isn't just fuel. It's a gamble. A lottery ticket where the prize is sustenance and the risk is digestive sabotage. But today you've made it work. You've eaten and you're still upright. That's a win as the day rolls toward its noisy, soot-colored afternoon. It's time to talk about one of the Victorian era's most soul-withering challenges. How on earth do you earn a living here? You hitch your coat a little tighter. One of the seams split last week, but you've artfully concealed it with a piece of twine and something that used to be a button, and head toward the clattering pulse of the city's working districts. Every step forward echoes with urgency. If you're not earning, you're not eating. And if you're not eating, well, we already covered how that goes. The job market in Victorian London is what economists today might call viciously oversaturated. A lot of people need work. A very small number of people are offering it. And for every job, there are a dozen desperate hands reaching out. Take your current gig. You're a costermonger, a street seller of fruit, veg, and whatever else you can balance on your barrow. Your rival misses. Brigsby from 3 stalls down once swatted you with a turnip for calling her onions mushy. There's turf, pride, and pennies at stake. You yell louder, arrange your apples shinier, and try not to look like you're losing circulation in your fingers. Every morning, you compete not just with other sellers but also with the weather, the police, and the occasional horse that decides your cart looks edible. Buy me oranges, 3 for a halfpenny. Sweet as a duchess's dreams, you shout. A child eyeballs your wares and runs away. Probably didn't have a halfpenny. Possibly scared of duchesses. You push on. But let's say you weren't a fruit hawker. Maybe you tried your luck at one of the factories. Ah yes, the glorious rise of industrial labor. The air inside the factories is thick with smoke, steam, and the low whine of dangerous machinery. Your lungs wheeze just thinking about it. If you're lucky, the factory has safety rails. If not, well, there's a reason so many workers are missing fingers. Or worse. Children work here too, of course. Sometimes you. Small hands are perfect for fitting into machinery, retrieving jam threads, or other tasks OSHA would absolutely faint over today. And then there's the match girls, young women who dip wooden sticks into white phosphorus. The work pays little, the chemical eats into their jaws, and they smile anyway. You knew one once. She said the glow made her feel special, like she carried her own candlelight. She died at 17. Historians still argue whether early labor reforms were driven by moral awakening or mounting public shame, especially after reports like the 1842 Children's Employment Commission hit newspapers. Either way, change came slow. Too slow for many. If factory work isn't for you, perhaps you've tried domestic service. It's the Victorian equivalent of job security if you can stomach humiliation and a 16-hour day. You ironed linens until your elbows locked. Polished silverware until your knuckles bled. You once had to re-iron a gentleman's trousers because his left knee looked judgmental. True story. Still, it paid. Barely. You slept in a cupboard under the stairs and the cook called you snail, but the porridge was regular and warm. Ish. Not everyone works legally, of course. You know a girl who's a mudlark by day and a flower girl by evening. The flowers are stolen. The smile is borrowed. She makes more than you do most weeks. And then there's the infamous world of resurrection men, those nighttime body snatchers who sell corpses to medical schools. Technically illegal, morally gray, financially tempting. You once overheard a man at the pub bragging about £5 for a fresh one. You didn't ask what fresh meant. If you're truly desperate, there's the workhouse. The place where hope goes to starve quietly. Conditions inside are famously grim, families separated, meals rationed, labor forced. Even Victorian novels warned readers against ending up there. You've passed by it before. Tall walls. Bars on the windows. The kind of place where sunlight forgets how to shine. People enter with empty stomachs and leave with emptier souls if they leave at all. But there are odd jobs too. Crossing sweepers clear the muck from paths so wealthier folks don't sully their boots. Tips are inconsistent. Some days a lady might drop you a shiny coin. Other days a gentleman might flick you in the forehead for existing in his peripheral vision. You also know a rat catcher, a lean man who talks to his ferrets and swears they speak back. His job is to control the rodent population in the city's worst corners. He wears a necklace made of tails which, depending on your perspective, is either hardcore or horrifying. And who could forget the herb women and street doctors? Selling concoctions of dubious medicinal value often made of ingredients you'd find behind a fish stall. They hawk elixirs, drops, and nervous tonics, all guaranteed to fix things you didn't know were broken. One of them tried to sell you a bottle of something that smelled like vinegar and regret. You passed. Even street entertainers need licenses now. A boy juggling in the square is eyed by a constable. You see the fear in his hands, he drops a pin and bolts. Performance is fine. Profit? Not without a cut to the city. Despite all this, despite the 12-hour shifts, the blackened lungs, the stolen wages, you keep going. Everyone does. There's an unspoken stubbornness here. A defiant dignity in the daily grind. A kind of grim poetry in the way Londoners earn just enough to survive and still save a penny for Sunday's pint. You walk past a seamstress bent over her needle, glasses slipping down her nose. Past a boy delivering coal, soot streaked into his smile. Past a messenger sprinting through the fog, letters flapping like wings. You're all stitched together in the same worn fabric, torn, patched, but unyielding. Work in Victorian London isn't glamorous. It doesn't offer prestige or peace, but it's yours. And until you can afford to dream bigger, it'll have to do. Your feet are aching. The grime on your coat has turned a new shade of gray. And as you turn onto a dimly lit side street, you realize what time it is. Evening in Victorian London is a shapeshifter. It begins quietly, like an old man clearing his throat. Then it unravels into something altogether louder, darker, and stranger. The day shifts its weight, and with it comes a new cast of characters. The workers trudge home, or to the pub if they've scraped together enough for a drink. Shopkeepers shutter their stalls. Gas lamps flicker to life, casting long yellow shadows that shiver on the cobblestones. And from somewhere in the distance, a steam whistle screams like a banshee with indigestion. You take in a breath that tastes of soot, stale bread, and wet wool. Evening has begun, and you need to find a place to sleep. But where? For the poor, nightfall is an obstacle course. If you've got a few pennies in your pocket, you might spring for a doss house bunk. These are dormitory-style lodgings where strangers sleep side by side in rows of beds that sag like tired hammocks. You don't get sheets. You do get company, some of it snoring, some of it coughing in ominous Morse code. Don't have pennies? Well, maybe you try a 4-penny coffin. No, it's not a literal coffin, just a narrow wooden box you sleep in, stacked alongside others like bookshelf volumes of weary humans. You lie down fully clothed, curl up like a comma, and hope no one sneezes directly into your ear. There's also the lean-to line, a rope stretched across a room where people pay a penny to lean forward and nap slumped over it. When morning comes, the rope is cut, and everyone flops forward like puppets with their strings snipped. Dignity? Optional. Sleep? Questionable. Affordable? Just barely. Still not an option? Then it's the street for you. Park benches are scarce. Covered spots are claimed early. If you're truly unlucky, you're curled in a doorway, sharing warmth with a newspaper and a stray dog that may or may not be rabid. Historians still argue whether London's authorities truly intended the poor to live in such conditions, or whether the lack of shelters was a side effect of apathy and poor planning. Either way, you're the one deciding whether the dry alley or the warm sewer vent is the better bet. As you shuffle down the street in search of lodging, the evening crowd thickens. Ladies in feathered hats float past, headed to the theater. Gentlemen puff cigars that leave smoke halos above their top hats. Their boots are polished, their teeth are intact, and they never seem to look directly at you. You're not invisible, but you're adjacent. You pass a pub where the noise spills into the street like overfilled beer. The windows are fogged and someone is singing a folk song at top volume. You consider going in, but tonight your coinage says no. You keep walking. And then you turn a corner and find yourself in Soho, one of London's shadier nighttime playgrounds. Here, the gaslight is dimmer and the rules looser. This is where gamblers, pickpockets, dancers, and drinkers mix freely. You watch a man stagger out of a gin palace and promptly try to shake hands with a lamp post. He apologizes when it doesn't respond. A young woman in bright lipstick leans against a doorway watching you with narrowed eyes. Looking for company, love, she asks. You shake your head. She shrugs. Suit yourself. The Victorian night is full of working women, many of whom have no other options. They're fined, policed, and yet strangely tolerated as long as they don't make too much noise. One woman you knew said she never intended to stay in this life, but men pay more for ruin than romance. She disappeared last winter. You still wonder what happened to her. Nearby, gaslight glimmers through a curtained window. You catch a snatch of violin music. Somewhere inside, people are dancing. It's a private club, you can tell by the hired doorman and the sound of someone complaining about the cheese being too warm. You stand for a moment and listen. It sounds like a different world. Back in your world, you're dodging horse manure in the street and trying not to get stepped on by a handsome cab driver whose decided traffic laws are for the unimaginative. Still, not everything after dark is grim. You pass a street preacher shouting about sin and salvation, flanked by two small children playing tambourines with disconcerting passion. You tip an imaginary hat and keep moving. A night soil man trudges past, yes, a man whose job is to collect human waste from privies. He's pushing a cart that smells like judgment and last week's regret. He nods at you like your comrades in hardship. You nod back. Respect where it's due. Eventually, you stumble across a warm yellow light spilling from a lodging house for single men. Tonight, you're lucky they've got a spot. You pay your coins and are led to a bunk that smells like wet boots and pipe smoke. You lie down. The mattress is thin, but it doesn't fight back. You listen to the lullaby of snores, creaking wood, and someone muttering in their sleep about unpaid debts and marmalade. Comfort is relative, and tonight this is heaven. One last oddity. There's a man across the room who sleeps with his boots on and his hat pulled over his eyes. He hasn't moved in 20 minutes. You wonder if he's sleeping, or just waiting for morning like a cat in a trench coat. As you drift off, you remember something someone once told you at a soup kitchen. Night's not just about sleep. It's about surviving what daylight kept at bay. The streets are quieter now. Less shouting. More footsteps. You close your eyes. The gaslight flickers. The city exhales. And you, cocooned in your threadbare coat, let your thoughts settle into something slow, heavy, and peaceful, if only for a few hours. Morning again. Sort of. You're not exactly sure what time it is. Your internal clock's been broken since that one week you tried coal hauling and forgot what sunlight felt like. But someone just coughed in a way that sounded alarmingly like a trumpet solo, and a nearby man is already lacing his boots with the vigor of someone late for everything. So, like it or not, it's time to rise. Victorian London never really sleeps, it just rests with one eye open. And now that your eyes are open too, it's time for another crucial daily task, getting clean. Or at least trying. You stretch, yawn, and feel your joints click like an old typewriter. Hygiene in the 19th century is less about fresh and more about functional. There's no toothpaste in neat tubes, no power showers with eucalyptus mist, and certainly no moisturizer unless you're rich or a very optimistic apothecary. You pat your coat flat, brush your fingers through your hair, and step outside where the very air is filthy. London's atmosphere is a heady brew of coal smoke, horse droppings, industrial smog, and the occasional drifting whiff of rotting cabbage from a nearby soup stall. The great stink of 1858 may be history, but trust me, its ghost lingers. So, where do you wash? If you're lucky, and today you're feeling mildly optimistic, you know of a public bathhouse. These establishments were created to help the working poor scrub off at least one layer of London. Inside, you'll find rows of wooden cubicles, tin tubs, and attendants who may or may not care whether the water's actually warm. You pay a penny, enter your stall, and begin the slow dance of pouring lukewarm water over your head with a rusted pitcher. No soap today, you used it up last week trying to clean your only pair of socks. But you scrub the worst of the grime from your arms and neck, and for a fleeting moment you feel almost human. There's no mirror, but you don't need one to know you look slightly less like a chimney sweep impersonating a scarecrow. Now for your teeth. Well, brushing is a generous word. You chew a twig of fragrant wood, willow or birch if you're fancy, and hope for the best. Some folks carry powdered chalk or crushed charcoal to rub across their teeth. It works sort of, but it also makes you look like you've eaten a fireplace. You remember someone mentioning a toothbrush imported from France, supposedly made with pig bristles and good intentions. You haven't seen one. You assume it costs more than a week's food. Then there's your clothes. Laundry day in the working districts is a battle of priorities. You want clean clothes, but you also need those clothes to wear while your others are drying. Most people wash garments in cold water using lye soap and then beat them with paddles or rocks. You've seen washerwomen with arms like blacksmiths. Sometimes you take your shirt off in the river and swish it around, hoping the Thames doesn't bite back. It's never a great idea. But hey, neither is most of your life. Historians still argue whether the working poor truly believed dirt was healthy or if they were simply too tired and broke to care. Victorian moralists loved to equate cleanliness with virtue but forgot to provide free soap. Imagine that. Back at your lodging, you hang your damp shirt by the window and watch steam rise off it. The window is permanently fogged, but you can make out silhouettes, people dragging carts, shouting about eel pies, fighting pigeons for dropped crusts. All of them trying in their own way to look presentable enough not to be mistaken for a corpse. Speaking of which, body odor? You know. They know. Everyone knows. Perfume is expensive and deodorant hasn't been invented yet. Some people rub lemon peel under their arms. Others swear by vinegar. A woman you met at the market swore lavender boiled in gin was the solution to everything, including toothaches and heartbreak. You didn't ask follow-up questions. Hair care is its own journey. You rinse yours in a tin basin, massage it with coarse soap, and comb it with fingers because you lost your brush 3 landladies ago. You don't look like royalty, but you look like someone who made the effort. That counts for something. Then there are public conveniences, a term that sounds polite and smells anything but. If you're desperate, there are public urinals, sometimes hidden behind privacy screens, sometimes just metal troughs that might as well be performance art. If you need something more seated, let's say, your options range from pay-per-use water closets to hastily dug pits behind taverns. You once tried the facilities behind a theater. It was like descending into Dante's Fifth Circle, but with more rats and less poetry. But today, let's imagine you get lucky. You stop by a barber surgeon's shop. More barber than surgeon these days. And for a halfpenny, he gives your hair a trim with scissors last sharpened during the Crimean War. He also sells hair tonic that smells vaguely of turpentine and lemons. You decline. The fringe tidbit? Some wealthier Victorians believed in full-body vinegar rubdowns to stay clean and ward off disease. It worked about as well as you'd expect. Great for pickling, less great for hygiene. Eventually, you finish your routine, if you can call it that. You feel fractionally less sticky, slightly less offensive to the nose, and not entirely unpleasant to be around. You smile. Your teeth may not sparkle, but they're still attached. You make your way down the road, stepping over a puddle of indeterminate origin. A woman selling flowers shouts, "Fresh posies. Better than soap." You smirk. She's not wrong. Across the street, a boy is shining shoes with a cloth that's seen better centuries. He offers to polish yours. You glance down at your boots, scuffed, cracked, but still mostly holding together. Why not? You hand him a coin. He grins and gets to work, humming something jaunty and off-key. As he buffs your left boot, you feel oddly proud. In a city that seems designed to grind people down into gray smudges, you've somehow kept a little shine. You're clean. Not hospital sterile, not aristocrat fresh, but London clean. Street clean. Human clean. And that, in this city, is something worth holding on to. Your back on your feet. Your boots lightly polished. Your hair semi-damp but somehow defiant. You've achieved a modest level of hygiene which, in Victorian London, makes you a glowing paragon of public decency. Now what? It's time to go earn your bread. Because despite the crusty romance people might wrap around this era, the reality is simple: if you don't work, you don't eat. And unless you've got connections, inheritance, or a patron with more money than morals, work isn't about career dreams or climbing ladders, it's about sheer survival. So where does that leave you? Well, today's job prospects aren't great. You're not apprenticed to a proper trade. You weren't born into the upper crust. And no, you don't have a family with a tea shop and a distant uncle who was something in India. You've got your wits, your hands, and the odd ability to fake confidence in front of authority figures. Welcome to the realm of casual labor. Your first stop is the casual ward of a workhouse where men line up at dawn hoping to be picked for day labor. The jobs are short-term, maybe coal shoveling, brick hauling, or digging ditches somewhere along the Thames. You're part of a human marketplace. Employers stand there, scanning the crowd like they're choosing fruit. You puff your chest a little, stretch your arms to look sturdier. A man in a waistcoat mutters, "Too skinny," and walks on. Rude. Eventually, a brewer's assistant gestures for you to join a group lifting barrels. It's hard, smelly work, and your back will be writing letters of protest all week. But it's honest pay eventually. You tuck the coin into your sock like it's made of gold. Elsewhere in the city, there are other types of work, less sweaty but no less brutal. For example, you could have taken up matchbox assembly. The pay is insultingly low, and the risks are glowing. Literally. Phossy jaw, they call it, a ghastly condition from white phosphorus exposure that makes your jawbone rot. If your face starts glowing in the dark, it's already too late. Historians still argue whether employers genuinely didn't know how dangerous phosphorus was, or if they just decided the profits outweighed the symptoms. Either way, factories didn't slow production. Feeling lucky you missed that one? Let's say you wander next through Spitalfields, where the silk weaving trade once boomed but now limps along. You pass narrow windows lit by the flickering glow of oil lamps where whole families work at wooden looms. The clack and snap of weaving fills the air like a metronome of desperation. You poke your head into one place just to see, and the master weaver shoos you away. "We've already too many fingers at the loom," he grumbles. You nod, retreating. It wasn't much, but you'd have tried. Onward then. Past the Thames docks where you might find work offloading cargo, tea chests from India, spices from Ceylon, and occasionally a crate that smells suspiciously like it's hiding something illegal. Dockwork is grueling, irregular, and controlled by gangsters who favor their cousins and drinking buddies. Still, you manage to find a place to haul a few sacks for a carpenter who just lost his apprentice to a better opportunity, which you assume is code for ran off to join the Navy or a better poker game. You heave, you sweat, you get paid a ha'penny and a questionable handshake. Around noon, you grab a meat pie from a street vendor. It's vaguely warm, possibly pigeon, definitely spicy enough to make you suspicious. You eat it anyway. Hunger trumps uncertainty. You wipe your hands on your coat and eye your options. You've done chimney sweeping before, painful, dirty, and designed for people about half your size. You've hawked newspapers, sold kindling, even tried your hand at busking with a mouth organ. You weren't good. People paid you to stop. Then there's domestic service. If you can fake politeness and pretend to know how to polish silver, you might wrangle a position as a hall boy or scullery servant. It's not glamorous. The hours are long and you sleep in the cellar next to the coal bin. But the meals are regular and no one tries to rob you in your sleep. You think about the time you knew a boy named Will who worked in a great house in Mayfair. He started at dawn, polished everything, answered bells like Pavlov's favorite dog, and left after 6 months with a limp and a deep distrust of porcelain. Then again, there are always the odd jobs. Fetching errands, sweeping alleys, watching over market stalls for a few hours while the seller visits the loo. You once got paid to stand still and look intimidating near a pawn shop. You're not intimidating, but the lighting helped. One job you swore you'd never do again? Mudlarking. Wading through the muck of the Thames at low tide, searching for scraps, bits of copper, broken tools, bones you can sell to glue makers. You did it once. You stepped on something squishy, caught a fever, and spent 4 days in a fever dream arguing with a hat stand. Some days you consider pickpocketing just for a second. But your hands aren't fast enough, your conscience still twitches, and you saw what happened to the last lad who tried it on a constable. The court gave him 6 months. The constable gave him a black eye first. You're no criminal. Not yet. The fringe tidbit today? Some people made money renting out their body for science by selling their corpses in advance to medical schools. You technically had to die first, but the idea of selling your future remains to pay for present lunch is a very Victorian paradox. As the afternoon sun dips behind a cloud of chimney smoke, you head toward Covent Garden to try your luck carrying packages for wealthy shoppers. You help a woman in a bonnet lift a box of china into her carriage. She thanks you without looking, tosses you a coin, and drives off. The horses look better groomed than you. You pocket the coin and sigh. It's been a long day, and you're tired in that deep, silent way that settles into your bones. But you've earned enough for dinner, a place to sleep, and maybe, just maybe, something sweet from the bakery that sells day-old buns for a farthing. As you trudge through the cobbled street, past chimney sweeps, street urchins, flower sellers, and the occasional poet muttering about the end of times, you smile. You worked. You survived. You lived another day in London. And that, in the city, is its own kind of victory. Evening is easing in again, though it never quite descends peacefully here. Victorian London doesn't so much go to bed as it shuffles into another mode, one with different shadows and new sounds. By now, your stomach is announcing its emptiness with operatic flair, and your feet have begun composing their own aching sonnet. You need to eat. You need to sit. Maybe even smile if the evening's merciful. So you drift toward the market streets where you know the pickings are slim but not imaginary. It's dinner time, London style, cheap, quick, and hopefully not crawling. On the corner of Fleet Street, a man shouts, "Hot pies?" Still steaming. Pigeon, maybe? You pause. He doesn't look entirely trustworthy, but he does have a beard that implies culinary confidence. For a penny, you get something encased in crust and still warm from sitting on a coal tray. It's flaky, it's meaty, and you try not to think about the fact that it could contain literally any creature smaller than a spaniel. You lean against a lamppost and chew, eyes scanning the passers-by. This is your dinner. No forks. No chairs. Just cobbles under your boots and steam curling out from a crusty corner. If you've got a bit more money, and tonight luck's been generous, you might find your way to a soup kitchen. These are charitable spots usually run by churches or benevolent societies, and they offer thick, soupy stews full of potatoes, carrots, and a mystery ingredient that might just be optimism. Inside, the room is hot and smells of boiled root vegetables and wet wool. People sit shoulder to shoulder, slurping from tin bowls. Someone coughs like they're trying to cast a spell. The bread is stale, but it sops up the broth, and for a few minutes, there's a sense of shared reprieve. No one's really talking, just eating with the intensity of people who don't know when their next meal is. If you're out of money entirely, there's always the option of food scraps behind taverns or markets, but that means fighting off competition from rats, cats, and children faster than you. Once, you tried to sneak a heel of bread from a pub's back alley and ended up getting chased by a 12-year-old girl wielding a mop like a warhammer. So you've learned to plan better. Sort of. Tonight, as the gaslights sputter to life and a soft fog creeps along the street, you wander into the fringes of a small crowd gathered near Covent Garden. A man is juggling knives while his partner plays the accordion and yells in fake Italian. Their show ends with a hat passing and a comedic bow. You throw in a farthing. Entertainment has value, especially when your days are measured in coal dust and bruises. From somewhere nearby, the scent of roasted chestnuts snakes through the mist. A woman with a coal brazier is selling small paper cones of them. You can afford a half portion. They're hot and slightly burnt, but your hands wrap around them like treasure. Eating becomes a kind of ritual: shell, bite, chew, sigh. Repeat. Victorian food for the poor is never about pleasure. It's fuel. But in the right moment, on a chill evening, wrapped in street fog and the hum of late-night clatter, even a chestnut can feel like magic. Historians still argue whether the diets of the working class were truly as nutritionally deficient as previously thought, or if modern assumptions miss how resourceful people really were. Regardless, rickets, scurvy, and malnutrition were very real guests at many dinner tables. You hear tell of a few better-off workers who try to scrape together enough for a pie and mash shop, a working-class comfort food. Minced meat pie, mashed potatoes, and a green parsley liquor that might remind you of swamp water, but in a good way. You once tasted it months ago, and you still dream of it sometimes. Other times, you make do with bread and dripping, leftover fat from roasts smeared on thick slices of bread. It sounds revolting. It is, unless you're very hungry. Then it's divine. Your mind drifts for a moment to the fancier fare advertised in shop windows: jellied eels, sponge puddings, roast beef joints, custards set in crystal bowls. Those are meals for people who know what a napkin is and aren't afraid to use one. You've got fingers and an oily sleeve, and that'll do. As darkness deepens, the city shifts again. Taverns begin to fill with men in soot-covered shirts and women in patched shawls. Some sing. Some fight. Some just sit quietly, cradling pints like they're holding hands with the last good thing in their life. You pass by a gin palace, its stained glass windows aglow, golden and gaudy. Inside, laughter echoes loud and loose. Gin's cheap, strong, and always a terrible idea. You know what happens to people who rely on it. You've seen what it does. But you still step inside. Just for one. You stand at the counter, order the smallest measure you can afford, and tip it back. It burns. It warms. It tricks your stomach into thinking it's full. And for a minute, the ache in your spine dulls. You catch your reflection in the polished bar, tired eyes, soot-smudged cheek, a tiny flake of pastry clinging to your collar. You smile at yourself. You look like someone trying. Someone stubborn. Tonight's fringe tidbit? Some folks believed eating coal dust mixed with molasses could cleanse the stomach. A poor man's digestive miracle, they said. You tried it once. It did not end well. Eventually, you find yourself a spot to sit, a quiet stoop near a bakery where the scent of day-old crumbles still lingers. You pull your coat tight, hug your knees, and let your thoughts drift. It's not glamorous. It's not easy. But you ate today. You earned it. And in Victorian London, that makes you something of a legend. Tomorrow will bring new aches, new grime, new shouts, and fog and lines to stand in. But tonight, your belly is not empty. Your hands are your own. And the city, loud and relentless as it is, feels like it might just let you sleep. You wake stiff and fog-brained, curled in a nook between two chimney stacks on a quiet rooftop, your unofficial bedroom on drier nights. Victorian London hasn't softened overnight. The city still breathes soot and hums with urgency before the first street cry rings out. Your back feels like it fought a horse and lost. But somehow you're still here, still you. You stretch, adjust your coat blanket, and begin the slow descent back to street level. The staircase creaks in complaint. The sun is rising somewhere behind a curtain of smoke. You've got maybe an hour before the streets flood with workers and wagons. The living proof that survival here is less about grand gestures and more about showing up again. But today is different, because tonight you want to wash again. Not just the bird bath in a basin splash. A real wash. A whole body, hot water, fingers wrinkling, grime melting sort of soak. Which means one thing, a visit to the public baths. Now, to be clear, this is not luxury. This is necessity dressed as charity. Victorian reformers, bless them, built public bathhouses in working-class neighborhoods to combat the pungent reality of city life. Some are stately with domed ceilings and ironwork, others resemble rebranded livestock pens. Either way, you're about to get cleaner than you've been in weeks. You make your way to the Whitechapel Municipal Baths, a squat building with flaking paint and a caretaker who peers at you like you've personally offended her with your pores. You pay your modest fee earned yesterday with your hard-won muscle, and she points you toward the men's section. 10 minutes, she grunts. More if no one's waiting. The air inside is hot and thick with steam. A row of iron bathtubs lines the tiled room like a strange, wet orchestra waiting to play. You choose one with fewer visible rust stains. A boy with a bucket pours in water from a pipe-fed urn, and for the first time in ages you hear a noise more soothing than a lullaby, running hot water. You step in slowly. The sensation is electric. Your feet, used to grime and chill, flinch like startled cats. Then you lower yourself inch by inch until the heat wraps you like a soft scolding. You exhale. You melt. You forget you're a human-shaped chimney for about 6 minutes. The soap is communal and questionably shaped. You use it anyway. You scrub behind your ears, down your arms, across your aching legs. You try not to think about who used this tub before you. You briefly pretend you're a gentleman with a valet and a linen robe, then accidentally inhale a mouthful of soapy water and cough yourself back to reality. Historians still argue whether bathhouses were truly embraced by the lower classes or just tolerated out of desperation. Many poor Londoners were suspicious at first. Why pay to do what the rain sometimes offered for free? Others, though, understood that in a city where disease lingered on every doorknob, clean skin could mean longer life. And there were those who came just for the warmth. On winter days, people would pay the penny fee just to sit near the boilers and feel heat on their bones. Today's fringe tidbit? Some bathhouses offered vapor cabinets. Little wooden boxes you sat inside while only your head stuck out the top. It was like slow cooking yourself in a Victorian pressure cooker. You saw one once. You declined politely. After your soak, you dry off with a towel that feels like it's made from carpet. You exit into the cooling day, steam still trailing from your collar. And for a brief moment, you feel almost new. It won't last, of course. London sticks to you. You turn a corner and immediately catch a blast of horse dung, coal smoke, and rotting fish from a nearby stall. Your skin might be clean, but your lungs are forever Victorian. Still, something about this day has shifted. Maybe it's the sunshine filtering through the haze, or maybe it's the feeling of smooth skin under your shirt. Either way, you walk lighter. You pass by a rag-and-bone man, his cart rattling with discarded pots, bits of cloth, and broken furniture. He eyes you warily. Last time you tried to trade, you talked him up for 10 minutes before revealing all you had was a spoon. He hasn't forgotten. Further along, you catch the sound of a harmonium playing a familiar hymn drifting from the open doors of a nearby mission chapel. You pause. Not to go in, but to listen. It's a sound from your childhood, or at least someone's childhood, echoing in the air like warm bread smells. It doesn't feed you, but it does something similar. Eventually, you reach a small square where children are playing with a hoop and stick, women gossip from windows, and a man with a parrot on his shoulder sells bootlaces for a ha'penny. You sit on a bench that groans under your weight and take a moment to breathe. You survived the workday. You scrounged a dinner. You bathed. You lived. For now, that's enough. In the shadow of looming progress, amidst the press of bodies and the relentless ache of poverty, this quiet moment is rebellion. You're not rich. You're not powerful. But you are clean. You have earned this 1 ounce of dignity with your calloused hands and tired smile. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Or something like it. But tonight, you're just a person in a city full of steam and sorrow, sitting still while the streets buzz around you. And maybe, just maybe, this strange, roaring city feels a little less hostile. Just for now, the air feels gentler tonight, as if even London is exhaling after a long day. You've made it to the final hours, that soft and strange time between the last clatter of wagon wheels and the first quiet snore behind a shuttered window. It's not peaceful exactly, but there's a kind of hush to it. A breath before the grind begins again. You're heading back toward your usual sleeping spot, winding through the half-lit streets like a cat returning to its patch of rooftop. But first, there's one final detour to make. You're due at the ragged school. Yes, really school. Not with desks in tidy rows or teachers with mustaches that smell like tea leaves. No, ragged schools are the Victorian answer to a problem no one rich wants to admit exists: what to do with the poor kids. They're charity-funded, scraped together in abandoned warehouses, church basements, or whatever semi-upright building the benefactors can afford. They're called ragged not because they're sloppy, but because the children who attend them are. Torn sleeves, dirt-caked faces, feet wrapped in potato sacks. It's not a uniform, it's a condition. You slip into the back of one such school, ducking under a beam and into a room buzzing with the soft mumble of barely contained chaos. You sit, half listening, half resting. You're not exactly a child anymore, but no one's thrown you out yet. Sometimes they even let you read aloud. The teacher is a thin woman with enormous eyes and the patience of a saint, or possibly just hearing damage. She drones gently through a passage from Pilgrim's Progress, and one of the smaller boys falls asleep with his face on a slate. No one wakes him. Historians still argue whether these schools were truly effective or just a way to keep her children off the streets long enough to delay their inevitable factory employment. But even with all their flaws, ragged schools offered hope not just to the children but to everyone in the room watching them learn something that didn't involve soot or soap. You trace your finger along the edge of a primer. The words are faint. The page is torn. But reading feels like power here. Like escape. Like maybe, just maybe, you don't have to live and die under factory whistles and soup queues. When class ends, you help stack a few chairs. One of the kids, no older than 7, gives you a crooked grin. You read real fast, he says. You nod. You'll read faster. He shrugs like that might be true. Then he runs off, barefoot and whistling. You walk back out into the fog with something softer in your chest than you had before. You pass by a group of women scrubbing stone steps with stiff brushes, their knuckles raw and hair tied back with string. One of them looks up and gives you a look that says, "We're all in this together, and isn't that just terrible?" It is. But it's also a kind of comfort. You pass by a shuttered shopfront where a boy your age is already curled up with an empty flour sack for a blanket. You nod. He nods. Neither of you speaks. Words are expensive at this hour. You climb the familiar fire escape of your rooftop haven. Boots thudding softly, breath fogging in the cooling air. Tonight, you have a crust of bread in your pocket and a tiny book of psalms you found in the gutter. That'll be your pillow reading. You settle in, coat wrapped tight, head resting on bundled rags, the brick chimney warm against your back from the day's sunlight. You nibble the bread. You hum a tune. Somewhere below, a clock tower tolls the hour. 12. And just like that, another day gone. Survived. You lie back and let your mind drift. The clamor of the city softens into background texture. The squeak of a cart wheel, the echo of a horse's hooves, the bark of a dog a few blocks over. Familiar, rhythmic, like a lullaby if you squint. Your last thought before sleep creeps in. I'm still here. And in Victorian London, that's a miracle all by itself. Now let's slow things down. You're safe. You've survived. You've done enough for one day, more than enough. You've worked, eaten, scrubbed, learned, wandered. You've seen the good and the grim, the warm glow of a bathhouse and the cold silence of a night street. You've made it through every inch of soot-stained cityscape, and still, your heart is beating. Your breath is calm. Your eyelids are heavy. Let your shoulders soften. Let your hands rest. Imagine that rooftop again. The one you've claimed as your own. Up above the gaslight glow and the clatter of carriages. The stars are faint, but they're there. And the wind, gentle now, brushes against your face like a lullaby made of fog and chimney smoke. In the distance, the city mutters to itself, but nothing urgent. Nothing demanding. The world isn't calling for you anymore tonight. You are wrapped in quiet. In stillness. The stone beneath you holds your weight like it knows you. Like it's always been waiting to carry you through one more night. And there's nothing else to do. No coal to shovel. No boots to mend. Just breathe. Long, slow breaths. You've earned this rest. You belong here, in this moment of peace. The world will still be spinning come morning, but for now it spins without needing you. So sink deeper. Let sleep rise like warm bathwater around you. Let go. You're home, here on this rooftop, in this moment, under this sky. And everything is okay. Good night.